come along, we can start with the initial remarks and so on. They'll join by then.
Yes, yes, yes. So, my dear participants, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shakila Shamsu, one of the most illustrious resource persons that I can have in my courses. She's always been kind to lend her time and her cooperation to the UGC, HRDC, ATMU, now the MMTTP, of course, in our faculty induction programs, in our these MMTTPs that we are organizing. And when it comes to some training development on the national education policy, then who better than Shakila ma'am, which is something I love to say always, because she was at the helm of the affairs when the policy was being formalized at the Ministry of Education now and the then MHRD. She was the OSD of the drafting committee, and she's been through it at every stage. And I'm so glad and I feel so inspired by Madam, given that even after her assignment is over, she's so active with, as she just said, schools and colleges and institutions in Kerala. And I see her in online meetings of the ministry also. So, a very, very bird's eye view of the policy, especially of academic leadership, governance, and management with Dr. Shakila Shamsu. As usual, I take great pleasure in welcoming her, and I'm sure all of you are in for a very rewarding session. Thank you, Shakila ma'am, for your time, and thank you always for your love and for the place you have in your heart for the HRDC. I have to acknowledge Callum every time I see you. I can never forget. It was completely your gift to us, and how much we developed and how much I, as a person, progressed by traveling to all these institutions and knowing what education in India is. So, an educationist herself with academic credentials, with the leadership credentials, Dr. Shakila Shamsu.
Thank you, Dr. Faiza. And from the invite that I got from your HRDC, I believe the focus of our discussion today is on the idea of flexibility in curriculum and dual degrees, the academic bank of credit, and so on. So I think I would largely focus on holistic and multidisciplinary education, which will then give them an overview of all these aspects and some insights onto the dual degree. So, greetings to one and all who have assembled here from, I suppose, various institutions and who have possibly been attending a number of such programs on the national education policy. Had this been about a 3 hour session, I would have really loved to have interaction in the initial mode like I do it for a flip mode. But because it's just about a 1.5 hour session, what I'll do is I'll delve into the topic and leave about half an hour for the interaction so that we can still have some thoughts from your side. However, let me give this opportunity, if at all there is a couple of you who want to express something, share your thoughts, or something that is nagging in your mind about national education policy, and not just confined to this particular topic but on any aspect of the national education policy, please ask that I can take up a couple of such interactions with you before I start the talk. So if there is someone or a couple of you who want to speak something, please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question or share your concern. Is there anyone who would like to share their thoughts, or shall I just go into the topic? Okay, I believe that no one wants to share anything at this moment. And I'll go into the talk and then we can have about half an hour for the interaction. So talking about a very wide topic that is sort of putting together 2-3 recommendations of the national education policy. I would like to always jump into that straight away, but always give you a kind of a overview of the national education policy, so that as educators, you must feel convinced that we need to do these reforms and we need to make about these changes because it is essential for the sake of our students, and we as teachers have a responsibility to get ourselves empowered. So any policy making exercise in any sector, and not just in education, is always a kind of a regular process, in the sense it happens at some regular intervals. And you have heard about economic policies, industrial policies, defense policies, foreign policies, economic policies, health policies. So, in all sectors that the business of government deals with, you have policies that come about. It is now as a part of developing societies. You have transport policies, you have digital policies, you have data privacy policies. So in all sectors you do find a lot of policies that keep evolving on a regular basis. So in that sense, you must appreciate that no policy remains frozen forever. It is not that a policy comes out, let us say, in 2020, and if someone is looking at 2060, that it may be the same policy, because there would have been changes. So policies are basically exercises in trying to address certain changes that happen within the society or the economy or the globe. And therefore there are certain drivers of change that calls for a sector to have a revised policy. So in the genesis of education policy making in independent India, as all of you may be from different disciplines, but all of you would know that in terms of three major policies that independent India has seen: one that came out in 1968, one that came out in 1986, which was partially modified in 1992, and in the 21st century, the policy that came out in 2020. That is not to say that in this sector of education, we have not, other than these three major documents, policy documents, no other reports have come out. It has been several reports have come out to look at various aspects of education over a period of time. And other than this, at a certain point of time when the Planning Commission was there, you had even the plan documents which looked at various efforts and the schemes of the government. So it's a continuous process. It is a continuously evolving process. But coming back to the policy and the National Education Policy 2020, you must understand that this policy is not trying to rectify any error in a previous policy. It is never to be understood that policies are gap filling efforts of a previous policy, or that they are trying to remedy something of a previous policy, because that is independent in itself. So most of us seniors who are here are beneficiaries of both the 68 policy and the 86 policy. We were exposed to an education system that came out as a consequence of those policies. Bulk of you also are the beneficiaries of the 86 policy, may not be the 68 policy. But our students are going to be the beneficiaries of the 2020 policy, and we as teachers are the catalysts or the change agents who will try to implement many of the recommendations of this policy. But again, as I said, what are those drivers of changes that propel this particular committee and this policy making exercise to put forward the recommendations as it is? So, in higher education, the major recommendations are about offering the holistic, integrated, multidisciplinary, flexible 3-year, 4-year program. And along with that, automatically comes in this whole idea of multiple entry and exit, of the academic bank of credit, of a national higher education qualification framework. Then we have brought out the national credit framework. According to that, we also thought in terms of the structure of the higher education. And we recommended that you can have teaching intensive universities, research intensive universities, and degree granting autonomous colleges. And we looked at a whole new idea of merging teaching and research together, and underlying the importance of the fact that in undergraduate education, we should have both teaching and research. And impetus to research has been given through an effort that we said to create a new body that we call the National Research Foundation, which has already become a reality because the Parliament had passed the Anusandhan Act, Rashtriya Anusandhan Act, and now it is there under the Department of Science and Technology, which implements the NRF. Then we looked at the cross-cutting themes in terms of technology in education. We looked at language in education. We looked at changes within vocational education, within open and distance learning, looking at equity and inclusion in education as related to the academic structure, including changes in teacher education, which is seen as something that needs to be housed within higher education, internationalization of higher education, and then the whole aspects relating to governance and regulation, and how to strengthen higher education institutions through better governing structures and through better effective internal governance systems and processes, along with changes that needs to come in the regulatory mechanisms of the UGC, the AICT, and so on. And then talked in terms of financing of higher education and financing of education in general, which is a major area of concern, because you need, if you want reforms to happen, you need to have funds for that. And that aspect was also seen. So it's a wide range. And as a policy, if I mentioned earlier about the higher education sector, the policy has covered the entire spectrum, right from early childhood care and the new paradigm of school education of the 5+3+3+4, then looked in terms of how you can have a more flexible curricula and a new approach to curricula and pedagogy, and changes in the assessment methods and so on, as a consequence of which four new curricula: the National Curriculum Framework for the foundational stage dealing with early childhood care and education, National Curriculum Framework for school education, which has already been approved in October 2023. Then we are right now, within about a week or two, we will get the National Curriculum Framework for teacher education, and then the Curriculum Framework for adult education. And all these, if you try to understand the spectrum of changes that we are looking at, looks at changes in the sense which are not merely tinkering reforms or small time changes, but are actually transformative reforms in terms of trying to transform structures, processes, the total approaches to teaching and learning and conducting of examinations and assessing the students and so on. So it is in a certain sense quite expansive, quite comprehensive, and all these are not to be understood as disparate efforts or separate efforts, but are seen in a very integrated manner, because in the sector we must understand there is a continuity and there is an organic linkage among the various subsectors of education, and they are not to be seen as separate from one another. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, the need for flexibility in curriculum and the need for flexibility in curricular choices emanates from certain drivers of change, as I mentioned. And those drivers of change are something which we all know, but maybe we need to really put that in actual words to make it understand that as the globe itself, the world at large, has seen certain changes in the character of knowledge and learning. That is, when you look at education, the two major components that you look at is knowledge and you look at learning. And knowledge and learning, both these constructs or both these components have undergone some changes in the 21st century. And that change is what we are trying to sort of recognize and make a system responsive to that. So what is that change in knowledge? So most of us who are here are people who have done our specializations in a given single discipline. And that is because at that time, knowledge was seen as if it resides or exists in a very isolated box by itself, and that it was only having that particular discipline which was important. So it was economics, or it was physics, or it was mechanical engineering, whatever it was seen as quite independent of other disciplines. Whereas when we actually moved in the 21st century, it is a realization that knowledge is not in independent boxes, but that knowledge disciplines actually get interconnected to one another. And the interconnections between knowledge is resulting in either an existing knowledge discipline broadening in its scope or new knowledge disciplines coming about. And you hear new terminologies which you did not hear in the 20th century so much. And those are the terms like interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. These all emanated because the character of knowledge was seen as being porous. The porosity of knowledge is like the osmosis effect, that something seeps in and something can seep out. And that realization that knowledge is seen as porous has been the realization that the world is living in what we call is a knowledge society. And that is distinguished from what? That is distinguished from being in an information based society. An information based society in the last decade of the previous century was the recognition of the advent of the computers and the internet, and where facts, data, concepts, theories, everything that we know could pass on through a super information highway across geographical distances in a synchronous time frame. And therefore, it was instantaneously. That itself was seen as a revolution. But from an information based society, we moved towards a knowledge based society, and the recognition that disciplinary boundaries are actually disappearing, and that disciplinary boundaries are either widening, or they are becoming interdisciplinary, or they are becoming multidisciplinary. So if the character of knowledge has changed, which is what an education system deals with, can we choose to ignore this change in the transformative of knowledge and continue to teach students in single disciplines? So the need to shift from silo-based degrees and silo-based disciplinary specializations to a more broader multidisciplinary offering and curricular choices is an imperative or an inevitable outcome of the transformation that happened because of the change in the character of knowledge. Along with this is the fact that there was a change in the paradigm of learning itself. Now, when we looked at learning, largely when we were learning, we are looking at only the cognitive aspect of it, which is referred to in the four pillars of learning as learning to know, which is transmitting what resides in me as a teacher, that is being transmitted to the learner, where I'm passing on theoretical knowledge, conceptual knowledge, let us say theories and so on, in a cognitive manner, which is the learning to know, the knowledge dissemination that happens, or the knowledge transmission that happens. But in the 21st century, there are other dimensions of learning, and that is learning to do, the skills part of it, the experiential part of it, the practical part of it, the application of the theoretical knowledge into real life situations and problem solving skills that students need to have. The third pillar of learning is emanating from the fact that we are living in a world where we recognize the importance of sustainability, and that is learning to live together and to live with others. So learning to live with others and learning to live together is a understanding of the diversity and the plurality. No questions will be taken up at this stage. I will go through the talk and we'll have the questions in the last half hour. So this whole idea of having sustainable societies is a recognition for moving towards peace-based education, acceptance of diversity and plurality, the right to agree to disagree, compassion and tolerance. These all are a part of what we call sustainable societies. And also in terms of trying to understand sustainability, not just among human beings, in terms of compassion and peace and tolerance and diversity and acceptance of diversity, but also with the other forms of nature, of environment, of the climate, of all sources of energy that are there, so that what we have inherited from our great forefathers on planet Earth continues to be there and replenish for future generations to come to enjoy that. So creation of sustainable societies calls for the third dimension of learning, or the third pillar of learning, that is learning to live together and learning to live with others. And the final pillar of learning is learning to be. Learning to be is nothing but we are about 58 of us gathered in this virtual classroom today, and each of us are quite different in terms of the potentials, the aspirations, the capabilities, the talents that reside within us. So we are all unique. And if we are all unique, then an education system must be individualized and customized. And we must have opportunities through an education system to optimize each individual's talent and capability. So the need to move away from structured systems to more flexible systems arises with these two major changes in the character of knowledge and the character of learning. Coupled with this, the third dimension, which has been the driver of change and a very major force that is calling us to make these changes, is the rise of disruptive technologies. So disruptive technologies have the ability to disrupt the way in which we communicate, the way we work, the way we travel, the way we do our banking operations. Many aspects of our daily life have been completely disrupted with the arising of disruptive technologies. So when you look at robotics, when you look at machine learning, when you look at data science, when you look at generative AI and chat GPT and Bard and so on, it is completely a break from what technology can do and challenging what? It is the machine intelligence challenging the human intelligence. And the power of human intelligence must always triumph, which would mean that our students should be equipped with some sort of different skill sets. So these three major changes, the transformation in the character of knowledge, and the need to move away from silo-based education, the transformation in the character of learning, and the multidimensionality of learning, looking at knowledge and skills and competencies and so on, and the need for individualization and customization, along with the challenge of disruptive technologies, forces us as an education system to move away from the structured system of education that the bulk of us over here, or each one of us over here, I would say, are all exposed to, and which was at that point of time appropriate, is not likely to remain appropriate for the future requirements. And therefore, our students, if we have to empower them, they need to be equipped with different kinds of knowledge, skills, and competencies, and capabilities, and attitudes that make them productive individuals, contributing to their individual development, economic development, societal development, political development, national growth and development, and become what we call 21st century citizens. So the kind of jobs that our students may be having or may be available to them are completely unknown. And this is a adage you must have heard across, that we do not know what the future jobs look like. That is the complexity in which the technology has come in, and which calls for different set of skill sets. The job profiles are one where the job description requires a student to have a knowledge of economics along with a knowledge of language. A job profile that comes in is a requirement where a mechanical engineering should have an understanding of business studies. So this kind of multiplicity of skill sets and multiple knowledge exposures requires an education systems to respond to that. So you must fundamentally understand that when the National Education Policy 2020 makes out a recommendation as moving in higher education towards multidisciplinary, holistic, integrated, flexible undergraduate program with a kind of flexible curricular choice, it is not because of the whim and fancy of a committee which had a romanticized idea of education, but because it is the crying need of the hour to help our students to become contributing individuals, because that is what an educational system is aiming at. They are the primary stakeholder. And in the process of trying to empower the students, we teachers and we faculty have got to get ourselves empowered so that we are able to actually help our learners to become effective. And that would mean that we shift from our traditional roles as a knowledge dispenser to become one of a facilitator and an enabler, and move towards what we call outcome-based education. So it is this backdrop that you need to understand. And that is why when you talk about flexible curricula and under the 4-year undergraduate program, we are offering a number of flexibilities. So the holistic multidisciplinary education that we are looking at, which is a different one from what we are used to, and which we have to accept as an attitudinal change, because usually we do not talk across departments. We are allowing students in the new paradigm of the undergraduate program to choose subjects across a range of disciplines. And so, if there are universities like Aligarh Muslim University, which is a comprehensive university, which has got even medical college, which has got even an engineering college, which has got management college, pharmacy, arts, science, commerce, so on, education, a student joining should be able to take across a range of disciplines, across sciences, social sciences, language and humanities, arts, and that is music and drama and sports and so on. So we are saying that in the 4-year undergraduate program, the kind of flexibility in the curricular choices can be given to the students subject to only one limitation. That is the limitation as to what that higher education institution can offer. So whether that institution can offer in all these disciplines, which we all know is not possible, because not all universities are comprehensive universities. But because they are not comprehensive universities, we need not say that a student need not be allowed to take that. And the UGC has framed the guidelines by which higher education institutions, say a college, can be allowed to enter into an academic arrangement or an MOU with another college, whereby it is able to give offerings in disciplines that it is not offering. To put it specifically, if mine is an arts college and students want to take up subjects in commerce or science or engineering or pharmacy or agriculture, and there are other colleges in that vicinity which offer these programs, my college must enter into an agreement with all these institutions in a very scientific, rational manner through a memorandum of understanding. And there are guidelines how that MOU has to be signed, by which I am able to offer multidisciplinary course offerings to students who want to take admission into my institution but do courses which are from other institutions. So the flexibility that we are giving is in terms of allowing a student to choose across disciplines. And it is not like you and I did, where if I am being told as being a bachelor's in political science, out of the 24 subjects that I may have taken at my undergraduate studies, about 20 of them would be in political science. And only 4 subjects may have been languages or maybe a minor subject and so on. Whereas today, when you're saying that you offer multidisciplinary, I can take a combination of various courses, which is maybe just political science, which can be chemistry, which can be language, which can be sport, which can be a vocational subject. It can be unlimited. But at the same time, I'll come in a short while to explain to you that this cannot be left as a free for all kind of a thing, where you may have too many combinations which may not be possible to really manage. But a certain rationale that every institution, so please remember, it will never be one size fits all. It will be varying from institution to institution, which are the offerings that are given. And as I said, very few institutions can, like AMU or JNU or Jamia or Delhi University or Bombay University or Pune University, which are comprehensive universities, offer a large bouquet of courses, because these universities house all these departments and therefore they are able to make those offerings. But largely we are in undergraduate education within affiliated colleges, and colleges are either arts colleges or science colleges or commerce colleges or management colleges or offering BCA and some other courses and so on, or law colleges and so on. So the offerings that we offer to the students are completely flexible, and that is a mindset change. So we have to be able, firstly, to be accepting that the 60 students in my class are not having the same combination of courses, but mostly that there may be 4 or 5 or 6 varieties of combinations of courses that the students in my class may have taken. And that can be not only in my own college, but they may be doing courses from other colleges. Now, if your question is that how will a student manage when you enter into an MOU, there is a common timetable committee, there is a common fee committee, there is a common examination committee, so as to ensure that, and a finance committee also, so as to ensure that the resources that are being used from the other institutions, and the time that is taken for attending the classes and so on, when framing the timetable, when giving the examination, do not clash. And if the institution is beyond a radius of, let's say, about 10 kilometers or so, we are expecting that the timetable is framed in such a manner that the student is there for 4 days in a given institution and maybe 2 days in another institution, so that the student is not subjected to traveling across two institutions on a daily basis and wasting time in the travel that he or she has to undertake. So in rural areas, the pragmatic or the more practical way would be to arrive at timetables where, if it is beyond 10 kilometers, and since travel would be a big problem in rural areas, one should not subject the student to traveling on a daily basis between 2 or 3 institutions, but rather have the timetable in a manner that the student is restricted to 2 days in another institution, or 1 day in one institution, another day in another institution, and the third time or 4 days in the host institution in which the student has taken admission. Now, suppose a student wants to take up a course, but it is not available in a face-to-face mode in the regular college system, and it is available as an online course or it is available as an open and distance learning course. That facility has also been given, that a student can do in non-technical courses, that is in arts, science, commerce, business administration, and so on. In non-technical courses, the student can take up to 40% of the credits through online courses or through ODL mode. So that is the third flexibility that is coming in. Then coming to the flexibility in terms of the duration. We are currently saying for arts, science, and commerce, that even for BBA and for BCA and so on, they are all 3-year programs. And we are now saying that we can have either a 3 or a 4-year program. All the technical and the professional courses are largely 4-year programs, whether it is engineering programs or it is your medical program and so on. Nursing is also a 3 years program. Pharmacy is also a 3 years program. So wherever it is 3 years, there is a possibility of the 4th year. Whereas if it is already 4 years, we are only bringing in the idea of modularity, that is, that we will allow a student to have the exit option at the end of every year. That is, the student can exit at the end of the first year and get a UG certificate. The student can exit at the end of the second year and get a UG diploma. The student can exit at the end of the third year and get a bachelor's degree itself, and need not forcibly continue into the 4th year. But should the student choose to do a 4th year, there is a possibility of doing a bachelor's with the 4-year combination. And in the 4th year, there are 2 options that are given. But before I go to that, let me come to the composition of the curricula itself. So currently what you're doing, you are saying that a student who is joining an undergraduate program is largely choosing maybe 4 to 6 courses in every year from a single discipline. But as I said, we have said we need to must go towards mandatorily, not mandatorily, I wouldn't use the word mandatorily, must encourage to go towards multidisciplinarity. See, one thing I'd like to tell you, that NEP does not make anything mandatory. Now, suppose even if we are talking about multidisciplinarity, but students, because they are having a very structured way of thinking, they want to still go into taking up only in one discipline, you can't stop them. But it is desirable that when you conduct the induction meetings, you must tell them why it is important for them to go multidisciplinary. That the danger of studying only a single discipline is most likely to result in their remaining unemployed or becoming underemployed. So we must, as teachers, as educational givers, make our students aware that the need to become multidisciplinary and study not like your elder brother studied, or like your father and mother studied, or like your teacher studied for that matter, is because today's requirement and the future requirement will call for the student to have multiple exposure to different disciplines, to have multiple skill sets and competencies. Yet if they choose because they have wanted to do it because of a comfort zone, there is nothing that we can tell them to force them to do that. But it is our moral responsibility to tell them that multidisciplinarity is the need of the hour, not only for today, but for about another 20 years and still further on. If you're looking at further future trends of employment, this is essential. So let us say that when the student comes in, we are talking in the 4-year curricula of 6 types of courses. Every year, a student accumulates 40 credits. So first year 40, second year 40. So in a 3-year program, 120 credits. In a 4-year program, it is 160 credits. 1 credit is calculated in terms of the time input. That is about 30 hours. And if it is a practical based course, it is 15 hours for theory and 15 hours for practicals. And the covering of the subjects, the assumption is that the student has met with all the curricular requirements of that course, and therefore that time input is covered, and therefore completing all the formative assessment and the summative assessment and all other activities related to that course, the student has acquired the credit of 4 credits or 8 credits or 6 credits and so on. Now, what are these kinds of 6 courses? We are saying that every undergraduate student will have certain common courses. These common courses are like communication skills, digital skills, collaborative skills, Indian knowledge systems, constitutional duties, environment and climate, women and sensitivity to gender, research skills, and so on. Now you will first have this feeling, how do I set aside time for all of this? Can we allocate periods for all of them? So here let me clarify to you that for these common courses, except for Indian knowledge systems and maybe some other skills that require a class, you need not allocate periods or classes for them. Then how do you transmit that? Whichever subject you teach, these are to be woven into your subject. Whether you teach sociology or whether you teach mechanical engineering, these common courses are basically interdisciplinary courses. In the sense, they permeate within all the disciplines that we are as faculty teaching. So whatever subject I teach, whether it is psychology, whether it is physics, whether it is chemistry, whether it is mechanical engineering, whether it is criminal law, whether it is pharmacy, whatever subject I am teaching, I need to instill in the students problem solving abilities, communication skills, digital skills, and so on. So which means that in a class that I teach, let us say of psychology, or let us say political science, my own parent discipline, I need to have communication skills. So I ask a student to present something that is a communication skill that I am trying to test. Or I give them a problem, or I give them a activity which makes them to read something, analyze something, and then come out with some finding. That is something which tests their problem. Or I want digital skills. I use a kind of technology in the class, like a video. I expect the student also to start getting familiar with using a computer, and therefore the digital skills or a research skill. So for all the common skills that we are talking about, or the common courses, these are interdisciplinary by nature, and you need not set aside periods and classes for them. But for each discipline that you teach, you weave this in a very conscious, let us say, rational manner, where activities are blended into these, where you're teaching the subjects. Then comes your core courses. Core courses are the core course that the student wants to do. That I want to learn economics, or I want to learn mechanical engineering, or I want to learn, let us say, English language and literature, or I want to learn, let us say, jurisprudence. This is the core area that the student wants to do. And the student chooses subjects related to the core courses. So the curriculum will offer across discipline the core courses. So when you do the curriculum framing, for most of the institutions which are right now in that exercise, because from the coming academic year, mostly all universities and colleges will have to start implementing this. The curriculum framing will weave in for all the courses that they are, disciplines that are there, the core courses that it needs to be covering. Then comes the multidisciplinary courses. So it means that other than the core course that the student learned, the student will take courses from other disciplines, which are called as interdisciplinary in some universities or multidisciplinary courses. So this core disciplinary and multidisciplinary are the pure cognitive kind of courses. But of course, we would like to have all the four aspects of learning, which is experiential, which is recognizing the customization requirements of learners and so on. Then the other three sets of courses: ability enhancement courses, which is language courses, which is functional language, which is media studies. These kind of all communication skills based courses are ability enhancement courses. Then skill enhancement courses, which is related to acquisition of skills and hands-on experience. When you're talking about skills and vocational courses, don't think of plumbing and electrical and all that. That is all a very outdated way of looking at it. We are talking about retail management, hospitality sector, health administration, agribusiness management, blockchain management, supply chain management, logistics and retail management. These kind of courses are what we are looking at as skill-based courses. And in the areas of engineering and science, medical sciences, it can be biomedical sciences, it can be artificial intelligence, it can be robotics. All these come in under skill-based kind of courses. Then you have the value-added courses. Here you can have your community projects. You can have courses which are add-on value in terms of, let us say, micro credentialing. So in terms of writing skills, in terms of, let us say, media studies, you can have that over here. Journalism. These are all value added courses, and this is all quite open ended. We are only giving you some, in the guidelines, a list of some courses that you can consider. In some universities, they are actually looking at skill based and value added courses as both being sort of interchangeable kind of thing. But that is left to availability of faculty, availability of teachers who can teach, infrastructure that you have, the teaching learning resources available, and so on. So this 6 categories of courses make up for the combination in the new multidisciplinary combinations. Now 40 credits that a student does at the end of every year, accumulating to 120 credits, it has been added one more dimension, that is every undergraduate student, not just of engineering or management or medicine, will have to do mandatorily an internship program. An internship can be of 2 credits or 4 credits, and an internship does not mean interning with industry or corporate, because you are talking of social science students, language students, humanities students, students who are in performing arts. In all these areas, all students have to intern, which means out of the 44.4 million students that we have today in higher education, roughly about 37 to 38 million students who are undergraduate students cannot think in terms of going into the corporate sector. So what is the kind of internships that we are talking about? We are talking about interning with maybe a kind of a community project, interning with maybe a postgraduate department, interning with maybe a library, interning with maybe a museum, interning with maybe a media house, any area that relates and where the student is actually going into the world of work, and where we are trying to address a major gap in higher education, that is the gap between the world of education and the world of work, where students do not go out of their campus and therefore are not grappling with the world of work outside. That our undergraduate students should, when they go out, automatically they will develop the certain skills that we call are the 21st century skills of communication skills, of analytical skills, of scientific temper, of problem solving approach, cognitive thinking, creative abilities, collaborative skills, time management, all these so-called 21st century skills, which are to be woven into the way we teach our students also, but at the same time that they will start deploying it themselves, using it themselves. Because when they go out and try to interview people, conduct a survey, understand a problem, handle a issue, and come out with some findings and come out with some internship report, they will actually get used to doing these techniques and methods. So 40 credits per year. If a student wants to exit and wants a certificate, that student should complete an internship within that year. So if I want a UG certificate, I need to tell a student that if you are wanting to take a break in the first year, you must mandatorily do an internship in your first year itself, or second year within your second year. But ideally, it can be in the third year within your fifth or the sixth semester if the student is not taking a break. But since we allowed multiple entry and exit, that a student can take a break and come back, that period is about 7 years. So the guidelines for the multiple entry and exit and the academic bank of credit have clearly spelled out a 7-year window. Let us assume we are going to implement it from 24-25. I calculate my 7-year maximum period from 24-25. If I take a break for my from my first year or second year, I should be able to come back to complete the remaining duration of the program within this 7-year window. So this flexibility that we give is facilitated by the fact that we are giving and we are not treating the student as a failure or a dropout. And whatever the student has studied in the first year or the second year will remain as having weightage, and the student can come back and complete it within that period of 7 years. Now, this is facilitated. This whole thing is facilitated by allowing students to take multiple courses across multiple institutions, across multiple modes, take a break, come back. All this is facilitated through the instrumentality that we call is the academic bank of credit. It is a digital storehouse of academic credits. No longer we are talking about physical grade cards and therefore the maintenance of database of the students. All this is being digitally stored in a storehouse and the student is onboarding onto it. We had initially thought it is going to be Aadhaar authenticated through the DigiLocker, but the recent guidelines that the UGC has brought about talks about a student ID that will be created, and that ID will be the permanent ID of that student for retrieving all student records of at any point, at anywhere for eternity. So the ABC, through the portal of abc.gov.in, individual students onboarding onto it to facilitate the mobility across institutions, across courses, across modes of institutions, and across elongated duration of study is facilitated, and the higher education institution, the university, will onboard onto it, thereby saying that this many universities are part of the ABC framework, and therefore these students can have mobility. In the long run, because these are all at very nascent initial stages, it is still being operationalized. In the long run, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, all the 1,000 plus 1,200 universities, all of them will be onboarded onto the ABC, and therefore you will have a complete national mobility across the student, across the institutions over here. Now, the 3-year program of the bachelor's, 5th and the 6th semester, as I said, if the student wants to exit the bachelor's degree program, the student is free to do so and is not restricted from, is not told that it is compulsory that the student does the 4th year. But such students who have, let us say, want to do a 4-year program for maybe international parity, or because they feel that that will be a good thing to do. And here again, I must mention 120 credits. If a student wants to major, then at least 50% of the total credits, that means minimum 60 credits, the student should have done in a given course, so that you can be called as a bachelor's majoring in a given discipline. So it can be a bachelor's with physics, or a bachelor's with economics, or a bachelor's with psychology or English language, provided out of the 120 credits, minimum the 50% is done in that same discipline. That can be the major. So even a three-year bachelor students is entitled to get a major, but we do not call it an honors. 4th year, when you go, you call that as an honors, and out of the 160 credits, here again you're talking about more than 50% credits being done in a given discipline, which is called a major with honors. And that 4th year student can do it with 2 majors, or he can do it with maybe in the sense there we are saying minimum 64 credits. So out of 160 credits, 64, 2 majors and 1 minor, or 1 major and 2 minors, that is possible in the fourth year of bachelor's. But there is a second option in the fourth year. Such students who have in the third year of bachelor's got a cumulative grade point average or a CGPA of more than 7.5, which means they are very high bracket performing students, and such students wanting to do bachelor's with research in their 7th and 8th semester will do a research project having or carrying a weightage of about 16 credits, equivalent to somewhat like your MPhil dissertation, and that is called a bachelor's with research. So in your undergraduate program, you have 3 types. A student who can exit at 3 years, a student who can exit in 4 years with honors, and a student who can exit with research. Now, this is impacting your masters. The 3-year bachelors will do the revised 2-year PG program, for which again the UGC has recently brought out the guidelines. The 4-year bachelors will do a 1-year masters, and the bachelors with research is exempted from doing the masters and can join the PhD program directly. So your PhD program will also have 3 streams for admission: a 3-year bachelor's plus 2 years masters coming for PhD, or a 4-year bachelor's with honors and 1-year masters coming in, or a bachelor's with research coming in for the PhD. So the entire flexibility is in the curricular choices, impacting your postgraduate education and also impacting the criteria for admissions to the PhD. And we have recommended that MPhil as a program will be discontinued. The rationale for that was MPhil was at the time when we were seeking jobs as lecturers, it was an eligibility for a job, or MPhil was seen as an eligibility to take admission to PhD. Today, it does not require, MPhil is not seen either as an eligibility to become an assistant professor, nor is it seen as an eligibility to join your PhD program. So it neither serves higher education, further higher education, nor employment as such, a redundant qualification. Therefore, we have decided that in the policy, we recommended MPhil be discontinued, and UGC has recently given the guidelines for that. Now, in this whole process, we have also seen that the UGC is trying to facilitate the idea of dual degrees so that students are able to acquire integrated degrees like BA, BEd and BSc, BEd and so on. And not only in teacher education, but along with that also BCom, LLB, computer science and LLB. These kind of dual degrees are also being encouraged. And this is not in the context of internationalization, mind you. I'm talking about degrees within the existing higher education institutions in our country. In internationalization also we talk of dual degrees, but that is where it is AMU plus maybe Cornell University or something. This is not those dual degrees. UGC is permitting dual degrees within our own higher education institutions, where a student simultaneously during the duration of the program is acquiring 2 degrees together without having to spend additional time. And that is also a flexibility and a requirement in today's emerging time, where in a limited time a student is able to get 2 degrees together. So in this whole exercise, the student also, when we talk in terms of giving flexibilities, one is the curricular aspect. The other is also that we are encouraging the idea of holistic education, and therefore we encourage debating clubs and dramatics and so on, health and wellness programs, and also their socio-emotional well-being to handle student stress, student suicides and so on, so that there is a need for psychological counseling. Now, the role of the teacher in all this has to be completely transformed. And here I keep telling that let us not teach our students the way our teachers taught us. And this is not with any disrespect. It is only that the teachers who taught us did a wonderful job in preparing us for a future in which we made it successful. Because at our times, there was no disruptive technologies and so on. And therefore, they equipped us in our own disciplines with deep specialization. But today, if we have to be effective teachers, we need to equip our students not to become I-shaped graduates, but to become T-shaped graduates, where there is both disciplinary depth as well as breadth of knowledge. breadth of competencies, multiple skill sets. So the way we were taught cannot be the way in which we teach our students. We have to completely change. And our role, because of the technologies, is not one of an information giver or an information transmitter or a knowledge transmitter. We have to, because this is all available at the fingertips through the internet. And while you're talking, your student can get you that information through the internet itself. Then why should that student come into the class? If it is there on YouTube, it is there in so many places. They have to come into the class because you need to prepare them how to learn in a more effective manner, which we call as learning to learn, and which is a direct reflection of what we call outcome-based education. And that making the connections, making them holistic in terms of developing the problem-solving abilities, cognitive thinking, creative thinking, analytical skills, rational thought, scientific temper, doing time management, handling all this requires us to transform from one of a knowledge dispenser to a facilitator, to an enabler, to a motivator, to a co-learner, because we are not so digitally empowered as much as they are. They use technology with much greater ease than you and I use, because they are born with technology. They were born with the mobiles. So how do you integrate that? So in our role, we become co-learners also with them and mentors. So mentoring students and students mentoring one another and helping students to mentor one another are certain new set of skills that we teachers need to acquire. And the way we teach cannot be a lecture mode at all. Because if you want to engage the learner and draw their attention, because you must understand it is not your 45 minutes alone. A student is walking into a college at 9 in the morning and leaving at 4 in the evening. And Shakila talks, Faiza talks, so one after the other we are talking. If we are only doing a monologue and they are simply sitting and passively listening, they will not be attracted to come in. They have to be actively engaged through small presentations where they are doing it, group discussions, flipped classroom mode where they are interacting, then quizzes, taking them for field study, assigning them some studio work. Such kind of activities, what we call that the teachers of today and the faculty of today have to create and move from passive learning environments to active learning environments, where all students are engaging with one another, they are engaging with you as a teacher, they are engaging with the curricula through a variety of activities, and these are all to be used so that it is driven towards what goal? The learning outcomes, the course outcomes, the program outcomes, and the program educational objectives. Obviously, in this whole exercise, you cannot test a student only from testing their memory. What is currently the bane of higher education in our country is that we do rote learning and we test the memory, and there is no real assimilation or learning. And this has to be changed. You have to test competencies, you have to test their capabilities, you have to test their skills. So you ask a question which is not descriptive and which is can be done by memorization, but one which helps them to analyze it. And therefore, the kind of formative assessment that we give, the kind of exercises that we give, the kind of activities that we give, force them to start looking at things independently of maybe the content and how this is to be analyzed in a problem solving situation, in a real application, in an analytical manner, and actually using all their abilities of independent thinking, critical thinking. And what we are trying to understand is, have they really acquired the knowledge? Have they really comprehended or understood? By using the skills, we are trying to understand, have they developed the competencies? So when you say, for example, that they need to have a kind of a debate, you are actually trying to understand whether they have the skills to communicate, their presentation skills, asking them to make a presentation. In a group discussion, when they go for a job and they face an interview, they may be having a GD over there and they can't remain silent. Somebody is dominating, but you should also make your voice heard. So, and in all this, the higher education has been made even more inclusive by saying that we can offer it in regional languages, a recognition that English need not be the only medium of instruction. India is a country which has a lot of pluralistic languages and a diverse linguistic um, uh, 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 character. And when we have a diverse linguistic character and we want to increase the GER, students coming from the rural areas should also have an equally enabling mechanism to join the higher education system. And because it is an English language, a sizable number from the rural agrarian background do not join higher education. So to make it inclusive, to make it open to people who come in from the rural areas, because every aspiring Indian wants to come into higher education, we have said that let us start offering it in regional languages. And we also must understand that this entire flexible curriculum is trying to bridge the gap between mainstream higher education, vocational education, open and distance learning, and in a certain sense, trying to incorporate teaching and research, trying to integrate technology. And in all this, there has been flexibilities in modes, flexibilities in language, flexibility in the choice of subjects, flexibility in the pedagogy, flexibility in the assessment, because flexibility is imperative in the 21st century learning. Because as I said, we do not know what the jobs of tomorrow look like. So when students have multiple skill sets, multiple competencies, it is more likely that they can get some sort of jobs which they have some minimal skills. And it is in this context that the NEP 2020 has articulated this entire transformation, which requires from our side a lot of change. As teachers, we need to unlearn many things and relearn something completely new. And that brings me to the quote that has been said by Alvin Toffler, that the illiterate of the 21st century is not one who cannot read and write, but the one who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And we as teachers, who are going to be the catalyst for change and empower our students to become productive individuals, cannot continue to teach the way we conventionally taught and move towards active learning environments which provoke students to achieve learning outcomes through a variety of activities, and which means we need to do a lot of homework, and which means that we have to go in prepared to be able to face a class, not for just giving a lecture like a monologue and silently they are listening to you, but in which they are also interacting with you in a very active manner. So this is the shift that we are looking at, and flexibility is the mantra, because it is required in the 21st century global skills that the student is living in, highly competitive, very dynamic, and technology is trying to dominate, and human jobs may go away, and we have to face that future and make our students equipped for that kind of an uncertainty, what we call a VUCA world: volatility, ambiguity, volatility, uncertainty, confusion, and ambiguity. This is the world that we call is the VUCA world. And in that VUCA world, we cannot sit there as conventional teachers and teach our students the way we were taught, because the requirements of future skills are completely different from the eras in which we were studying and the ages in which we are living in today. So let me stop here and take up the questions that many of you were raising your hands. Thank you very much. When you ask a question, please introduce yourself, the discipline you teach, and the institution you're affiliated with, please.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm Shilpi, Dr. Shilpi from CSJM University, Kanpur. I teach psychology to undergraduate students and also to students who are enrolled in PG Diploma in Guidance and Counseling. So, my problems with NEP is that, when I look at the policy, it promises lot of good things, and it is such a liberating experience listening about the policy, as you very beautifully detailed. But on ground, when I see the policy, this skill development paper, ability enhancement papers, I find as a teacher that many a times we do not have the infrastructure, the resources to really put this policy into practice. So there, even when it comes to skill-based papers, we teach the syllabus that we teach in skill-based skill enhancement course. The syllabus is actually not talking about skill, the hands-on experience of the skill. It rather talks about skill as a theory, and even the assessment
What is
part,
the
we are
skill
not
course you
assessing the
teach?
skill practically.
Are you talking about being a faculty for psychology in which you teach a core discipline of psychology and you also teach a skill course?
Yes, ma'am, because this
What is the
any
skill
according to
course?
NEP, the we
We are not
have like three.
expecting you to take that skill course at all.
No. Even the teachers, the other teachers who are taking skill-based courses, this
Give me
is
an
what the
example.
students.
Give me an example of a skill course.
Skill courses like communication,
So that's an ability
English,
enhancement. Okay. Yeah. That is
English
not
language.
a skill course. That's a
Yeah.
communicate. That is an ability
Skill is,
enhancement.
yeah. Just to, I'm sorry, skill is environmental science.
Okay. Now, when you teach these subjects, you are not asking existing faculty from other disciplines to teach it. And somehow your university or your college seems to have a very misplaced notion to, sorry to say that the
Mm-hmm.
curriculum framing has not really done justice. Because when we
Mm-hmm.
say skills, we want that skill to be taught in a very practical manner. So when you say
Yes.
communicative English, you cannot say
Mm-hmm.
what is the theory of communication of English. You have to
Mm-hmm.
actually make
Mm-hmm.
the students start
Yeah.
communicating, reading and
Yes.
writing and expressing themselves and actually
Mm.
reciting things or saying a conversation or giving them examples that when you go out and you're speaking, when you're selling a product, how will you sort of market that product? These are the kind of skills that we are looking at. And when you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
and the skill, the ability enhancement, that can be in your communicative English. When you're looking at environment, we are not expecting conventional UGC appointed faculty, but we are
Mm-hmm.
expecting people from industry or people who
Mm-hmm.
are working on the ground. They can be NGO people, they can be civil society people, they can be people who are working in the grassroots on protecting the environment,
Mm-hmm.
who will come and talk about it in terms of saying that how do you ensure green energy, or how do you ensure that forest fires do not happen, or how do you ensure that depletion of groundwater does not happen, or how do you look at
Mm-hmm.
bore well to be done. So
Mm-hmm.
somehow your institution, and that is where the sad part of poor implementation of NEP is beginning to dawn on us, because you're using
Mm.
existing faculty who have not got
Mm.
a clue of what that particular
Yes.
discipline is, and you're then asking them to double up to do that. So I'm very, very
Yes.
sorry, but can you tell me the name of your institution once again?
This is CSJM University, Kanpur.
Okay, so I think we need to start bringing out this kind of an information where
Yes,
we should have
ma'am.
a set of FAQs so that
Yes.
universities come to realize that this is
Hmm.
not what is expected, because it will be a disaster. If we ask
Yes,
teachers, if I am a
precisely.
student, a teacher of psychology, and I am being asked to teach something in environment, I am not competent to do that. Let us be frank about it. So
Actually,
you
no.
require a completely, yes.
What is happening is that a person who is who has training in environmental science,
Mhm.
only that teacher is teaching, but the way, the pedagogy and the syllabus, the content of the syllabus is more theoretical than skill based. And the assessment also, this is a
No, you can
feedback that
have
I
the
got from
theory.
my students.
You can have the theory because you cannot. Like if
Ma'am,
you want me
actually,
to
this is
talk
not
about,
environmental science. This is environmental psychology.
no, no, whoever is trying to intervene, let me just try and clarify. You can have theory even in your skill enhancement courses. Suppose I'm talking about logistics management or talking about retail management or agribusiness, there is a theory part of it. But
Mhm.
largely, when you say skill enhancement,
Yes,
you need to have the work related experiential part of it, which requires students to start doing a field study, which
exactly.
requires them to understand how this is sort of translated into real life situations. So I think,
Exactly,
as you
ma'am.
said, FAQs are needed, which means there is a very poor implementation
Yes.
in our
Ma'am, I think
understanding of skill enhancement and ability enhancement courses. Yeah,
Now, I
let
think
me.
the regulatory bodies also need to delve into the practically the implementation of the policy, because many a times, what I see in my around me, many universities, I find that,
No, I
people
do
are
not
always in a
want,
haste to.
I do not agree to your point of view because I don't want regulation to become an overbearing system. India has a large set of 48,000 colleges and
Mhm.
1,200 universities. And I
But
don't
then,
want
ma'am, if
UGC, AICTE, and NCT and all of them to start interfering in the daily working of institutions.
no,
Broad
but
guidelines are
if
given.
we are not implementing,
No,
and
no, no,
then
Shilpi,
we are
no,
failing the
Shilpi. No,
students,
no,
because
no, not at
students.
all. Shilpi, you cannot have regulatory bodies determining and undermining the autonomy of higher education institutions. You cannot ask regulatory bodies to start spoon feeding institutions. Higher education institutions, with the leadership and with the faculty, we need to respect the academic capabilities of higher education institutions. The guidelines are there, and initially, if there are issues of this kind, we need to keep reverting back to these guidelines for its implementation. And as I said, this kind of exposition that you are now giving to us helps us to understand that bodies like the UGC or the NCT or any regulatory body should also bring out, along with the guidelines, a set of FAQs or a set of, let us say, what I would say, actual handbooks on giving examples of how this has to be transacted, and so that there is not, misplaced emphasis on theory or a misplaced emphasis on skilling. There were examples of some institutions where students were asked to do a skill course by just going into the field without a theoretical understanding. That is also not a correct way to go about. But already we in the National Education Policy Committee were quite critical of the overbearing role of the regulatory bodies and wanted that the regulatory system should be light and tight through the Higher Education Commission of India's new architecture, which unfortunately 3.5 years down the line, that bill never became an act. And then we would have had the General Education Council and standard setting bodies to help higher education institutions to ensure that the NEP implementation for academic curricular transaction could have been more effective. So that is the defect that is there. But we don't want regulatory bodies to start becoming polices and inspectors and start controlling higher education institutions, which is completely undermining the autonomy of higher education institutions. I hope you can understand the spirit with which we are trying to sort of enlighten you on this perspective of the regulatory systems in higher education world over. So when we now moved from accreditation, a major reform, instead of your 5 and 7 point scale to binary accreditation, this is what the world does. And India as a country, as an exception, with only a couple of other countries in the Asian continent, used to have this kind of a very complex accrediting system, which we have now tried to rectify through the binary accreditation. So these are long-term reforms in higher education, and we should not try and take up very short-term measures which will undermine the autonomy of higher education institutions. So in that spirit, you must be able to understand that improper implementation does not mean the UGC sits like a hawk or an eagle and keeps a watch over that, but rather that implementation guidelines need to be more robust, more nuanced, more detailed, so that institutions are able to implement it in the correct manner.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I agree with you, and I'm
Well,
on
I
the
don't
same
want
page
you to
when you talk
dominate the
about.
discussion, Dr. Shilpi. I don't want you to dominate the discussion. I think there are other participants who have an equal right to the time for interaction.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, the next participant, please. Is there anyone to ask a question? If not, we can get back to Shilpi. There were two participants who had raised their hands. Anyone? If not, Shilpi can continue with asking her question. Yes, Shilpi, please go ahead.
I'm thoroughly satisfied with your answer, and I'm on the same page when you talk about autonomy of higher education institutions. But with autonomy also comes a sense of responsibility, which I think is somewhere lacking. We have been in a rush to implement NEP 2020 without understanding the nuances of it, and I completely agree with you. I welcome this, initiative on your part, which you proposed in terms of FAQs and stronger guidelines for implementation of any NEP 2020. This would be a welcome move. Thank you.
So we have not rushed into NEP implementation. That is the sorry state of the reality. The policy
Hmm.
got approved on 29th of July 2020. And today we are
Mhm.
sitting here on 13th of February, and the NEP still looks like the elephant in the room. I think it was extremely delayed in bringing out the guidelines, and in institutions still undergoing sensitization and orientation programs. But as a
Hmm.
positive and an optimist, I still feel better late than never. And so, as a country which is so diverse, and the fact that education is a subject in the concurrent list, it is not an easy task to bring all institutions under varying state governments to start implementing it. But the fact that most of the state governments have now brought out their own regulations aligned to the NEP requirements, and all disciplines are also becoming aligned to the NEP. I do hope that within a couple of years, across the nation, we will have the NEP in at least in a certain sense as a uniform rollout. But as long as it is not a uniform rollout, and only a few institutions are doing it and others are not, it might be very counterproductive, because you will find that students do not get the benefit of mobility from one state to another state. They are not having many other benefits in terms of getting credit mobility, choice of courses. We are not talking among institutions. So, better late than never. We did start, and I think the pre planning for any new policy, you cannot say tomorrow I switch on to the new mode. It requires at least a year and a half prior of planning the curricula, planning the way in which this is to be transmitted, and what are the tools and techniques that we use, what are the teaching learning resources. So, if our higher education institutions have not done that, and they do only a half baked implementation, like you said, it will be very, very counterproductive, and that is really a matter of great apprehension and concern. So, you're very right. I think institutions didn't do any curriculum planning. They sought their existing curriculum, they rehashed it, called it by
Hmm.
different nomenclatures with the available faculty, and as a consequence, you are finding these kind of very practical problems in implementing it in the colleges. Even now, it is not late, because you may have started with first year, you still have the second year, you still have the third year, you still have the fourth year. Even now, the mid course corrections can be done, where you do effective curriculum planning for your second year courses, for your third year courses, for the kind of internship projects, for the kind of activities to be woven into these activity, into each of these courses that need to come in, for the credit breakups that you want. Even now, it is not too late for institutions to do that. So I do hope that programs like this, which are of sensitization, are not just individual enrichment and empowerment, but you carry the message back to your institutions and to your HODs, so that they come to know that this is what is being conveyed. And these are all recorded talks. You can even make people listen to them if you feel that you're not able to convince them on your own.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. There should be a guideline also on assessment of skill-based and ability enhancement papers. Uh,
No,
I
that
think
is
we need
woven
to
into the
modify.
4 year program. That is, we are woven into the 4 year program. We have told the kind of
Okay.
assessments that they need to do, the kind of
Mhm.
tools that they need to deploy. And there's one guidelines which is on the pedagogy and assessment itself, that is there of the
Mhm.
UGC. So if you do not have that, I'll try and share that across to Dr. Faiza, so that she may be able to transmit it to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm surprised that we have 57 faculty in this place, and the best talent that we have is the ability to communicate. And if you, as faculty, are remaining so passive, I'm quite circumspect about your ability to have interactive classrooms, which is quite a sorry state of affairs. I don't think we teachers can remain silent like this.
Uh, Good evening, ma'am. Shakila, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening, Professor Sajid.
Yes, ma'am. I couldn't introduce you. In fact, I was
No,
in the.
Faiza was here. Faiza was here,
Okay.
so there's no problem on that account. I am
Uh,
only trying to say that none of the participants are quite keen on understanding, or I don't know whether I've clarified everything that they know, but
no,
I
no, no,
don't
ma'am.
believe that.
They are
It's
very interactive, ma'am. They are very interactive. I don't
today
know.
only we had Dr. Shilpi who's had a question. Nobody else was interacting.
Okay. I mean, it's very surprising because even I took one session and another people, they all said that they are very interactive. So, my friends, what's wrong with you? I mean, Shakila ma'am is the person who was instrumental in drafting this National Education Policy 2020. So she is a source of knowledge as well as information. If you want to know any about any aspect of NEP 2020, ma'am is available for us for another couple of minutes. Please ask, please clarify if you want anything.
मैम एक सवाल है मेरा।
जी, आप अपने आप को इंट्रोड्यूस कर लीजिए। आप कौन से विषय सिखाते हैं और कौन से इंस्टीट्यूशन से?
मैं डॉक्टर प्रफुल्ल कुमार बीएन
जी।
मंडल यूनिवर्सिटी
हम्म,
मधेपुरा बिहार से बोल रहा हूँ।
बताइए।
हिंदी विषय है मेरा। मैम जैसे कि हम लोगों ने एनएपी में आपने बताया था ग्रेजुएशन कोर्सेज के बारे में 3 ईयर, उसके बाद ऑनर्स और फिर विथ रिसर्च जो आपने बताया, तो और एमफिल को हमने हटा दिया है। जब अभी हम लोग पीएचडी के जो बच्चे इनरोल होते हैं और उनको मतलब रिसर्च ओरिएंटेशन जो उनका पीएचडी कोर्स वर्क अभी चलता है 6 महीने का, और उसके बाद वो रिसर्च करते हैं। और हम लोग चूंकि एमफिल करके आने के बाद हमें वो उसकी जरूरत नहीं, वहाँ कोर्स वर्क भी होता है और डिसर्टेशन हम लोग लिख करके आते थे, तो पीएचडी में बहुत ज्यादा दिक्कत नहीं होती थी। लेकिन एनईपी में इसे हटा देने से और फिर जो आपने बताया कि 3 तरह के बच्चे रिसर्च में आएंगे, तो फिर क्या रिसर्च के साथ न्याय हो पाएगा, नहीं हो पाएगा, एक आशंका थी मेरे मन में, इसीलिए मैं वो सवाल आपसे पूछ रहा हूँ कि उस स्थिति में कैसे क्या सब होगा।
नहीं, जब हमारे टाइम में, जब आप जैसे बताए, एमफिल करते हुए हमें काफी एक्सपोजर होती थी रिसर्च मेथड्स और रिसर्च टूल्स, और हम खुद ही एक डिसर्टेशन लिख के एक इनिशियल एक्सपीरियंस होने के बाद हम पीएचडी में जाते थे। उस टाइम में वो बहुत ही जरूरी थी, क्योंकि एमफिल के प्रोग्राम से ही हमें पीएचडी में एडमिशन मिलती थी। लेकिन
जी
आज
जी
के
मैम।
दिन में यूनिवर्सिटीज खुद, उन्होंने पीएचडी के लिए एमफिल की जो मिनिमम एलिजिबिलिटी थी वो निकालने के बाद उन्होंने 6 महीने का कोर्स वर्क कंपलसरी कर दिया है, जिसमें उन्हें जो भी हमने रिसर्च मेथड्स और रिसर्च टूल और स्टैटिस्टिकल टूल्स, ये सब उसमें इंक्लूडेड किया गया है। जब वो 6 महीने के कोर्स कर रहे हैं, तब देर इज नो रीजन, जैसे हम बताए, एक एमफिल के कोर्स करने के लिए जिसमें आप टाइम स्पेंड करते हैं, यू आर स्पेंडिंग मनी उस वो कोर्स करने के लिए, एक कोर्स करने के लिए एक रीजन होनी चाहिए। जब एमफिल एक एलिजिबिलिटी नहीं है, इट इज ओके, कोई स्टूडेंट्स किया है, किसी ने नहीं किया है, बट हमने पीएचडी में जो एमफिल में आपको जो स्किल्स लेने थे वो हमने पीएचडी के कोर्स वर्क में लाए हैं। तब हमने ये एमफिल की जरूरत कंटिन्यू करने के लिए, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप और हम जो एमफिल किए हैं उसकी वैल्यू कम हो गई है, वो नहीं कम हुआ है। क्योंकि हम जब गाइड करते हैं स्टूडेंट्स को, तो हमारी जो एमफिल की बैकग्राउंड है वो डेफिनेटली हेल्पफुल होती है। बट आज के दिन में जब स्टूडेंट्स को लिमिटेड टाइम में कितने सारे पढ़ाई कर सकते हैं, जैसे डुअल डिग्री किए उसी टाइम में जैसे पीएचडी के, अब क्वालिटी ऑफ पीएचडी ये नहीं कह सकते हैं कि हमारी टाइम की पीएचडी क्वालिटी और आज के आने वाले दिनों में जो पीएचडी करेंगे इस क्वालिटी की समानता में, क्योंकि वो एमफिल के बैकग्राउंड से आए हैं, वो बेटर क्वालिटी होगा, ये हम कहीं नहीं बोल सकते। देयर इज नो एविडेंस टू टेल अस दैट। ऑन द कॉन्ट्ररी, आई वुड ऑल्सो आस्क आज के दिन में जो क्रिटिकलिटी हम देख रहे हैं, जो क्रिटिकल व्यू हम ले रहे हैं कि पीएचडी के स्कॉलर्स में जो रिगर और जो डेप्थ जो रिसर्च में होनी है, इसमें काफी डाइल्यूशन हो गया है। और जो जर्नल पब्लिकेशंस भी लोग करते हैं, उसमें एक बड़ी सी रैकेट बन चुकी है कि
जी
जर्नल
मैम।
का भी एक आज के दिन में एक दिन में 50 जर्नल्स नए नए आ जाते हैं ताकि पीएचडी स्कॉलर्स उसमें छप जाए, और इतना ही प्लेगियरिज्म और कट कॉपी पेस्ट के तरीके से जो निकल रहा है, these are things of concern. So
यस मैम।
because you may have 3 categories of PhD entrance, that doesn't really matter as long as uska rigor, uska quality और उसकी जो the depth of that knowledge वो स्टूडेंट अक्वायर करे, तो उस पे हम एम्फोसिस करें। और वो जो प्रोसीजर है उसके बारे में हम नहीं देखें। और एमफिल इज नॉट एनी मोर नीडेड, क्योंकि जब आप असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर बनने के लिए आप एलिजिबिलिटी में आप एमफिल नहीं मांग रहे हैं, तो क्यों एक स्टूडेंट उतने टाइम जो है 1 year या 2 years, वॉट एवर दैट ड्यूरेशन में बी अक्रॉस यूनिवर्सिटी, ज्यादातर तो 2 years प्रोग्राम है, why should that student waste another 2 years? Because by the time the student is a postgraduate, the student is more or less around 23 years, and then you are talking, so you are looking at the productive age of a person where the student is coming out with a PhD almost at the age of 27 or 30. That is a very long period. So you have to find ways to reduce that. So bachelor's of research करने वाला वो एक student होगा maximum maybe 21 or 22. But that student may not come to research immediately. But even if he comes after a couple of years, by 25 or 26, the person can be a PhD holder or a 3-year degree holder, 2 years master's करने. So we are reducing that time by 27 more or less. It is possible for someone who is going in a linear manner कि वो उसका PhD भी कंप्लीट करे। और ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है आज के दिन में, क्योंकि एज जो है, जो आपको किस तरह से एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिल सकती है, स्कोप, हर पर्सन जो PhD कर रहा है वो टीचिंग में जरूरी नहीं है कि वो आ जाए, वो कहीं और भी ट्राई कर सकते हैं, रिसर्च लेबोरेटरीज में ट्राई कर सकते हैं, साइंटिफिक पोजीशंस में ट्राई कर सकते हैं, खुद का कुछ एंटरप्राइज स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं। सो लॉट ऑफ ओपनिंग्स दैट आर देयर विथ माइक्रो क्रेडेंशियल्स। वो अगर कंप्यूटर्स भी सीखे तो कुछ और भी कर सकते हैं। सो इन दैट सेंस पीएचडी का जो रिगर है वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, ना कि वो एमफिल से आया तो उसका रिगर है और इस वजह से उसकी क्वालिटी है। ये हमें कोई एविडेंस नहीं है कि आज के दिन में वो एस्टैब्लिश कर सकते हैं।
जी मैम।
Akhilesh Mishra has raised hand, so let him ask his question and we'll take that as the last question.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I am Dr. Akhilesh Mishra, Assistant Professor from Central University of Karnataka. Ma'am, it is regarding this multiple entry and exit. Ma'am, is the NEP saying that at
your
any,
voice is cracking.
Hello?
Your voice is cracking. Can you type your question in the chat box? Sajid can then read it out for me.
Yeah. Akhilesh ma'am, you please write your question in the chat box. I will read it for ma'am.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Meanwhile, other people, we have so many interactive participants. Rishi Thakur sir, Nancy ma'am. I mean, these people are very active. I don't know why they are not asking question today.
अखिलेश का क्वेश्चन टाइप हो चुका है?
अभी नहीं आया मैम. Just now we haven't received till now. Akhilesh ma'am, please hurry up.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, please.
Ma'am, my question is regarding this multiple entry and exit. As I am a teacher in teacher education, that is my department of education. So if NEP is allowing now students to exit at any stage, so we have altogether 4 semester, and the curriculum is very integrated and interwoven, like one semester is integrated with the second semester
that is very connected. So if one
Yeah,
student
I
takes
got your point. I got your point.
yes, ma'am.
No, no, Akhilesh, I got your point. So the 2-year B.Ed program is to be discontinued by 2030. All teacher education institutions will offer 4-year integrated teacher education programs. You have time up to 2030. The 2-year B.Ed programs that are currently ongoing have a limited life of only another 6 years or so. By 2030, the NCT is already bringing out the curricula for integrated teacher education program. We have already started offering it. We have 4 stages of school education: foundational, preparatory, middle, and secondary. So you will have a BSc B.Ed or a BA B.Ed or a BCom B.Ed or a BVOC B.Ed, which will be for all these 4 stages. So you can have almost 16 to 20 combinations of courses for teacher education. Now, for teacher education, the modularity of exit with a UG certificate has not been brought in even under the new integrated teacher education program. We are right now saying it will be an integrated 4-year program, and the student is acquiring BSc plus B.Ed or BA plus B.Ed for either middle stage or foundational stage or secondary stage. And that will be the criteria for their getting the 4-year degree program. So all standalone teacher education institutions have been asked by 2030 to convert themselves to become what we call multidisciplinary. Either they open their own departments of arts, science, commerce, or vocational, or they open only arts and science depending on what resources they have. And if they don't want to start, they should enter into an arrangement with another institution which is offering arts and science, so that they offer the integrated. So if you are a teacher who is teaching in an education college with a 2-year B.Ed, please note that this can only continue till 2030. After that, that 2-year B.Ed is a discontinued qualification. Teachers who do a 2-year B.Ed will not get jobs in school education. So they have to move towards integrated teacher education program, and the ITEP program that is now there, the new one, has not introduced the exit option at the end of first year, second year, because it is seen as an integrated teacher education program, and the modularity has not yet been envisaged in this 4-year program.
Right. Akhilesh ma'am, you got the answer?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. All right, sir. It's now
Yeah,
6.
yeah. Yeah, Mother sir.
Yeah, we can end if there is any more question.
Ma'am, if you allow, one question has been in
Yeah,
the chat
please,
box.
please,
Yeah.
please.
So it is from Rajesh Kumar Singh, a participant of this course. He has asked, ma'am, from where a student start when he passed the 3rd semester and go anywhere and come after a year?
No, the student in 3rd semester means has completed only the first year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it is only UG certificate. So 3rd semester, if the student is taking a break, the student can come back and join the 4th semester, but he is not entitled to get a UG diploma, because for getting a diploma, the student should have completed the 4th semester.
4th semester.
But as long as the student is taking a break and wants a UG certificate, as I said, if he wants a certificate, my internship must be completed. If internship is not completed, he can take a break or she can take a break, but the credits earned will be stored, so that the student is not asked to repeat what has been done in first semester, second semester, third semester, and can join the 4th semester within that 7-year period or window to come back and complete the 4th, 5th, and 6th, or if necessary, even the 7th and the 8th.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. I think Rajesh sir has got the answer. So thank you very much, ma'am. On behalf of UGC HRDC, on behalf of my participants, and on behalf of myself, ma'am, I'm highly grateful to you. You are quite busy, I know, but whenever I approach, ma'am, you get time for us, for our HRDC. I'm highly grateful to you, ma'am. And hopefully, we are going to organize another workshop from 20th of February, from 20th to 28th, ma'am. And regarding that, I will call you later on.
Sure.
Thank you very much, ma'am.